Few subjects interested Rosenberg more than art. The expression of the soul of man was capable of forming types, and it was basic to the true meaning of society. Directed in the proper way, it led men into a direct contact with his milieu. If misdirected, it led men away from their natural state. It was man's highest achievement, and Rosenberg planned to utilize its potential to the fullest in advancing the folkish state. He noted with interest that Christ was depicted more than occasionally as a Nordic racial type. This was not the preference of the Roman Church, with its Jewish roots. Art that was acceptable to Rome had to move toward a Jewish model and away from anything that smacked of possible Nordic origins. A new art based on the Nordic legacy of a few artists capable of performing types of anti-Jewish school. Art that was acceptable to Rome had to move toward a Jewish model and away from anything that smacked of possible Nordic origins. A new art based on the Nordic legacy of a few artists capable of forming types of the anti-Jewish school would move toward a Nordic hero Christ that would buttress the Nordic folkish ideal. The Germanic art is close to but still different from Nordic Greek art in the pre-contamination years. It seeks the ideals of beauty, heroism, courage, harmony, truth, and so on. It rejects Impressionism, Cubism, and similar modern art forms. These are incompatible with and alien to the Germanic folkish culture. Rosenberg was concerned both with form and with subject. He was not so blatant as some of his contemporaries, notably Mussolini in Italy, in demanding that art show Hitler, the SS, the SA, and other political themes. He did demand respect for the past and for heroes capable of forming types. He also demanded that heroes be depicted with Nordic features and that symbols of evil be shown with features of alien races, especially Jews. Art was to convey impressions of the myth and of the folk. It was to reinforce the ethic and values reached elsewhere in his works. Art, of course, included music, drama, sculpture, architecture, and literature. He provided an extensive critique in the myth of the various inferior works in all fields. Most of these, of course, hold no interest for the contemporary reader. Few have passed the test of time, even for those who rejected the German myth. In architecture, Rosenberg remained true to his principles. No designs for skyscrapers and large buildings in cities figured into his scheme of things. His great interest was in adapting medieval and other early designs to contemporary use. Architecture had to support the new reconstruction along folkish lines. We must now pause and take stock of Rosenberg as a political thinker. It is usual to try to categorize thinkers. He is an ultra-conservative in the sense of accepting the legacy of the past, adding to it, changing a little, and passing it along to future generations. He is not a regressive or a reactionary in the sense that he wished to return wholly to the past and merely reconstructed what had been. He is, by his own admission, an enemy of the French Revolution and its child, liberalism. He makes much of the evils of liberalism both in terms of its denial of the past and its ties to plutocratic capitalism. He is equally the enemy of anarchism since he accepts a strong state system and of traditional socialism. And, as we have seen, he opposed Marxism. Some have tended to cast both Rosenberg and Chamberlain into the old aristocratic conservative mold. While he believes in an oligarchy of the talented and the superior type-forming heroes, he does not accept a true aristocracy of name and title. He prefers aristocracy of merit. He therefore rejected necessarily any forms of democracy, save for rural direct democracy. He cannot countenance parliamentary party democracy. His values are, by traditional Judean Christian standards, transvaluated, but their roots are ancient Nordic. It is not merely the curious, untrue, distorted history of a 19th century aristocratic conservative. The values are not merely derived from a Ludwig Jan or of other supranationalists of the previous century. They are not the lying tradition of a dreaming poetic composer of the last century. They are, to the best of Rosenberg's ability, to reconstruct the new yet old mythi of Nordic people built over uncounted centuries. He shares the concern with other thinkers who base their systems on racial values that the white or Nordic or Aryan or Germanic race is now gasping its last breath. Rosenberg believed that society can be reconstructed if direct action were to be taken against encroachments against Nordic racial values. But like Spengler, he saw that time was limited. He lacked Spengler's pessimism, but shared his grave concern. Put another way, he thought that there was one last fleeting chance for Nordic civilization. If it failed, and he had to put all of his trust in that one effort, there would be no second or third chance. Thus, he tried to win and avoided the clear implications of failure in the myth of the 20th century. One can offer many criticisms of the book. It rambles at times. It contains some of the most ponderous prose known to man. Parts of it deal with purely passing fads, especially in art fields. Parts are simply poor history. But overall, it is a massive and impressive work. In my judgment, it is the first and most important book of Nazi philosophy. It contains the essence of the state and the directive powers of its leaders. It projects, in a concise way, the new state that Rosenberg and the others wished to build. It is important to bear in mind that the Third Reich was a wholly uncompleted state. Its major aims and designs never left the drawing boards. In this, it is unlike any other major ideology. Much of this book will appeal only to the German mind of the 1930s. It constantly reminded me of the movie Triumph of the Will. Neither were really designed for export, and both were aimed only at a specific audience. If a contemporary reader in America were to fail to respond to either, it would not bother Rosenberg. Both were to leave more of an impression on the audience than is evident to the average reader of today. The message is very difficult to bring to a contemporary audience in a different culture and operating under a different myth. There is much of communism, democracy, liberalism, even fascism to export to other cultures and nations. This is not so with Rosenberg's ideas. It was ideology wholly fitted to one and only one society at one particular time. If Rosenberg were to be alive today, he would probably agree that his book is not suited to any culture remaining.